part of this session that the team has put together. And I love the theme, right? I'm the lead for the economic prosperity community at Solve, and a future that works for everyone. And the thematic areas that we're going to be discussing today are exciting, they're urgent, they are exactly what we need to be talking about as we hopefully start to recover from this pandemic. I am really pleased to welcome everybody, and as we see more people trickling in, by the way. This topic has long been a focus of the economic prosperity pillar that I lead. It's a topic that, it can seem daunting, like I was mentioning, because we are in the middle of a pandemic. But hopefully in this session and with the community, the Solve community, we'll be able to look at some of the ways in which can solve that. I'm excited to hear from our panel today, moderated by Anna Tunkel. Anna and APCO Worldwide are partner for this session, and more broadly, a strategic communications partner to MIT Solve for the past several years. Is a majority women-owned business strategy, communications, and public affairs firm with presence in more than 60 markets. Anna is the head of APCO's global strategic initiatives and partnerships, building impact multiplying collaborations across an ecosystem of leading global corporations, international organizations from the UN to the World Economic Forum, civil society, entrepreneurs, and academic institutions, and of course, Solve. Thank you. So Anna, thanks for being with us today. Take it away.
This is wonderful to be here virtually. I do have incredibly fond memories of doing this in person at the Kresge Auditorium at MIT. I can assure you, for those of you who haven't been part of this, that the energy is contagious, and I can only be hopeful that we will all convene in person, either in New York with MIT Solve or in Cambridge. I wanted to welcome everybody who is joining us today from different parts of the globe, and of course our panelists, who I will introduce shortly. So the title of our session, A Future That Will Work for Everybody, has somewhat of an intended pun, because we will be talking about the future of work, and it's truly important that this future will work for everybody. We are here to speak about an incredible transformation across industries, sectors, markets, and a disruption that both employees and employers, both current and future, are undergoing. And it is no longer a future. Thanks to COVID, I strongly believe that we all are living in a rather accelerated present. And so for that, just to frame that part, consider those numbers. According to UNCTAD, COVID-19 has led to surge in e-commerce and accelerated the digital share of global trade by 17% in 2020 alone. Across business sectors, there has been a quantum leap in digitization of products and services, and accelerating the pace of adoption by an average of 10 years. I spoke to a chief digital officer of a global retail company last week who told me that their e-commerce went from 7% to 31% as a portion of their entire business just this past year. And Amazon alone hired 420,000 employees just in the past 10 months. At the same time, the pandemic really exacerbated and widened the rift between different types of jobs. And sadly, we're seeing an emergence of a new class of work from home and cannot work from home type jobs. More than half of displaced low-wage workers will need to shift to different occupations and will need different skills to remain employed. In the US alone, people without a college degree are 1.3 times more likely to need to make transitions compared to those with a college degree. And Black and Hispanic workers are 1.1 times more likely to have to make this transition between occupations compared to white workers. We're also entering a new age where college degrees will no longer guarantee employment and career progression. And the pace of the technological disruption also means that the reskilling and upskilling will need to happen several times over during the course of a job. And so I'm delighted to introduce a panel of our experts who are here to talk not just about the daunting problems, but also about solutions and innovative ways that their organizations are collaborating and working with others. So first, we have Corinne Ripoche, the CEO of Edico Group Americas, the world's leading talent advisory and HR solutions company. Corinne started with Edico Group in her native France in 1993, and throughout her career specialized in leading major business transformations, moving through senior sales, operations, and product roles. She was appointed the global president of Pantone in 2017 and expanded her executive role with Edico Group Americas in 2020. She's an advocate for women leadership in the workplace and beyond. She's a member of C200, advisory member of the Global Women Business Collaborative, and a member of Paradigm for Parity. We have Todd Zipper, who is the president of Wiley Education Services, that partners with universities and employers to deliver education solutions that help learners earn their degree, connect with education and employment, and continue to develop skills throughout the career. I think Todd probably feels at home here among the community of entrepreneurs and innovators because he has a long history in scaling education startups, previously holding leadership roles in education dynamics, and was also a founder and president of Learning House that was acquired by Wiley in 2018. We have Chrystina Russell joining us all the way from South Africa. She's the executive director of Southern New Hampshire University's Global Education Movement. It's an initiative that offers bachelor degrees and pathways to dignified employment for refugees and learners who would otherwise not have had access to higher education. She led the program expansion across two regions across more than 9 regions across Africa and the Middle East, where 95% of students graduate in 4 years, and 88% of them are employed within 6 months of graduation. Chrystina is actually a solver and one of those prestigious innovators recognized by Solve a couple of years ago, and also a recipient of TED's Audacious Project. And so those of you who haven't heard definitely should listen to her TED Talk. And last but certainly not least, all the way on the West Coast of the United States, we have Jaime, who is the director of Upskill America at Aspen Institute. It's an employer-led movement to expand opportunity for America's workers. Jaime joined us from Sacramento, where he previously served as Deputy Secretary for Employment and Workforce Development for California Labor and Workforce Development Agency, and previously held various positions in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Labor Employment and Training Administration. So, Jaime, you will be our government representative wearing multiple hats, in this discussion. So, to get us started, Corinne, I'd like to go to you. Adecco is in a rather unique space, anticipating the needs of both employees and employers at a time that is more challenging than ever. Could you speak more about the role of Adecco Group in North America and your perspective on this changing nature of workforce and skills that are needed to succeed in this post-or still COVID world?
Yeah, so thank you, Anna, for the question and for the introduction. And I'm excited to be with you today and to share my thought and what we do at the Edico Group. So the Edico Group is an HR solution company, and our role and our purpose is making the future work for everyone. So I think that we are clearly aligned with the topics of today. More or less, it's a global company, 12 billion revenue per year, more than 30,000 employees, and which is even more important for me is that we are able to enable 3.5 million careers per year. And we took a commitment at the end of 2019 to upskill more than 5 million people within the world. So, and what we can say that in the US, so the Adecco Group US represent 20% of our group worldwide. So we will clearly play a strong role in that upskilling situation or upskilling business. So I would like to highlight four key trends that we have seen during the pandemic. And you touched it during your introduction, Anna. So the first one is clearly the acceleration of the business model transformation. And we need more and more digital skills. And we can say that today, 2/3 of the CEO are expecting to change their business model to have a more digital business model. And just for you to know, probably in Q1 this year, we upskill 7,000 people in the digital world when we upskill less than 3,000 last in Q1 2020. So you can see the acceleration. The acceleration is clearly there. The second very important part is the pandemic told us how it was important to take care about our essential worker to maintain our economy. And here we have to keep the momentum because we need clearly as an employer and a future employer for the new generation, it's clearly to give you a good pay for a good job. So we can't continue, to time to time not to give the right job to the right person. The third point that we have seen as well is about the women. 5 million of American women left their job in 2020. And we can see this has an impact on the family as well. So how us as a woman, how me as a woman, and clearly, you know, having a strong commitment in terms of D&I, how we can help and support this woman back at work. And the fourth one, is about the remote worker and how the leaders should change their way of leading teams, and how we can increase, the IQ versus EQ, or the EQ versus IQ, how our leaders should have much more empathy than what they have probably in the past, and how a new leader should be an authentic leader, and probably the generation which is at MIT today, who should be empathetic and extremely authentic to be successful in their life.
Great, and we're going to unpack some of those points with the great different perspectives that we have in the room. Todd, I'd love to go to you and talk to us more about this forging new path between education and employment, with an eye for a future generation, and what role does Wiley and Wiley Education more specifically play in this journey?
Yeah, thanks so much. So first, I think it's important to define, this idea of career-connected education at the, in terms of outcomes, and what it is to us. It's about helping people secure a job, get a better job, change a career, and to make a good living, right? And I think there's been such a disconnect often between that career-connected education. Second, we look at supply and demand equation in terms of education. So as an education supplier, which we partner with universities throughout the globe, we can map the curriculum design to the learning experience, to the skills we believe employers want based on the research, based on what they're saying. Or you can start on the demand side with the employers and what the talent, what they're hiring for, what they're looking for, and what they're saying, and what they're demanding of you. And so our approach around this is trying to bridge both that supply and the demand side. We've expanded our efforts so that we are not just focusing on the universities. As I mentioned, we are now, we started off as what we now call ourselves like a career-connected OPM. For those who don't know the word OPM, it's online program manager, where we kind of help universities do everything from build a course to host the course or the program, to market the students, enroll the students, and a lot of things in between. We are now focusing on employers as a starting point around education, and we created this concept we call Wiley Beyond, where we're working with employers and states on both upskilling and reskilling, as well as earning degrees or advanced certifications through their company or through the state. Another part of our business that I want to talk about is this business called M3 that we acquired about 18 months ago. It started off actually as an IT staffing firm, but they identified this gap that their clients had between what their talent needs were and the actual available talent pool. And the company morphed into effectively a new model and an education company. So we call them part education company, part IT staffing firm. And so they're centered around, finding students, training those students, all based on the high demand technology needs of specific clients. So there's this frictionless process for the learner. We're even helping out the university because we're getting most of our students kind of as they're leaving their university. And the friction process that exists today for employers. If you talk to any employer today, especially over the last quarter or two, people are leaving right now. They're finding other jobs, they're moving, and that's a tremendous cost around them. So that's kind of how we're thinking about, this idea of career-connected education, and how what some of the things Wiley's doing to help out.
It's perfect to follow up, Todd, with this, especially on the points you were making, Todd, around how do we really to employment. And so Southern New Hampshire University really took a close look at the study that asked university presidents and provosts, how ready are your grads for their entry level or first jobs upon graduation? And of course, well over 90% said that the grads were completely ready, they were going to be great. Then they asked employers the same question, and I think it was about 9% that said that recent college grads were really ready. And so what our president did with that data was sort of look at how could we create a degree that would prepare learners who wanted to really be ready for the workforce. So this is not necessarily a traditional liberal arts degree, which SNHU does offer in different contexts, but our competency-based degree was developed not only with academics, but also invited employers to the table to be able to create the degree. And also, so that was a big shift, right? Because normally it is just the academics. So we were able to really ask employers what is missing from students, what kind of projects do you want them to work on? And then instead of having the class, the degree be around classes, it's instead around projects. So the degree is almost as much what it is as what it isn't. And so what it's not is it's not course-based, it's not class-based, there's no professor, there's no final exam. But still accredited, fully accredited degree, the same as if you came on our campus and attended courses and classes by the same accreditor that accredits many of our elite neighbors like Harvard, MIT, of course. And so essentially the way that it works is a student logs onto a platform, they see a project, they have to complete that project, and the project is then assessed according to a set of criteria. The student must quote unquote master all of that criteria. If they do not, they receive the project back with feedback, and they could submit it an infinite number of times until they actually master the project. So it's a little bit more calibrated towards the world of work, for at least for my college experience. I was always a go-getter and working hard and getting my good grades. And then I got to my first job and my employer told me that I did a bad job on my first project. And then I went home and cried and had to like put myself together, and, you know, and my whole identity was in crisis. And I feel like that's another thing that we've learned from this competency-based degree is that our students are really ready to take, and grads are ready to take feedback. They don't have an idea of just getting a letter grade, but actually engaging in a project that requires them to maybe do a social media campaign, work with missing data sets, use Excel, try to persuade somebody of an argument, create a video. So like degree or curriculum, it's certainly not perfect, could always use improvement, but it's been really exciting to see students engage in projects in their learning that they're more likely to see in the world of work, as well as get used to feedback, get used to not being perfect. And then, Anna, I would say that to the other part of your question, we are implementing this degree. We were the first institution in the US to get a competency-based degree accredited in 2013. And it's been really exciting to see the field of higher ed also joining in this. I think there's now about 17 institutions also doing competency-based degrees. It's not only great for learning to get ready for employment if that's what the student wants, but it's also a little bit more flexible in time and flexible in cost. And so we are implementing this also outside of the US through the global education movement. We're in Rwanda, Kenya, South Africa, Malawi, and Lebanon in both camps and urban areas. And the last thing I think I'll say in terms of implementation of a US degree, you know, one place, while the projects are really oriented towards work and give students several years of experience of what it might be like to tackle work type projects rather than writing papers per se. We do have more work to do around the cultural calibration and making sure that it's accessible to all learners in that way. So that's going to be an exciting next step in the learning. But the design is fundamentally a little bit different and for the world of work. So it's not for the traditional academics per se, but in terms of those employers that were telling us, hey, folks are not ready for work. This is our attempt to remedy that within higher education.
Such a great point. And also, I think ultimately, and I see that Todd is prolifically responding to some of the questions we get in the chat. But I mean, what I'm leaning towards is also that there's so many different solutions that will be applicable to different populations, skills, environments, and markets. And would love to touch a bit on that also further in our discussion. But Jaime, I think from your perspective and kind of building on what Chrystina said in terms of building on the right skills and creating equal career opportunities, and as we focus on perhaps more of the vulnerable workers that has been sidelined by the pandemic, what ecosystem, tell us more about what ecosystem you're building with Upskill America and what's sort of the thinking and the vision behind this.
Anna, thank you, first of all, for having me on the panel. Really appreciate it. This is really a great discussion and very important as well. Just by way of background, Upskill America, we're part of the Aspen Institute. We're part of the Economic Opportunities Program within the Aspen Institute. What we do is we work with employers to create, expand, or improve education and training practices so their workers can receive the skills and knowledge that they need in order to be able to move up in their careers. Our concern is, of course, especially the frontline and entry-level workers who are disproportionately female and people of color who have faced the greatest obstacles historically to being able to move up in their careers. So that's really where we focus. We have three areas that we're working on right now and kind of ecosystems, as you said, Anna, that we're working on developing. We really have been working over the past 9 months, thanks to a grant from Walmart and Strata Education Network, to look at the lasting impact of 2020 and the skill needs and the practices that companies have changed as a result of the pandemic, and also heightened attention on racial inequalities. And really what we saw, spoiler alert here, no surprise, was that the pandemic really sped the digitalization and automation of many jobs and increased the need for digital skills. And I hopefully can have a chance to talk about that in a little more detail later. We've also joined with a group of employers and Digital Us to create an employer network advancing digital skills and equity. So we're bringing together a group of employers who are really concerned about the digital skill needs of their workers and also those in their communities. And also just a shout out to Wiley, who was the first company who saw the need for this work and stepped alongside us and sponsored the work and really helped us get the work underway, and would love to talk more about that in a little bit as well. And then finally, we are studying right now, along with our Latinos in Society sister program at the Aspen Institute, what companies and organizations are doing to develop digital skills of their Latino workers, especially immigrants and first-generation workers. And I'm really excited about launching that work now. So as you can tell, Anna, digital skills are a huge issue. In the work that we're doing now, we're focused on upskilling in general, but where there is so much attention and heat right now is definitely around those digital skill needs.
Continue a bit with this topic of digital skills and digital transformation that I think we're all experiencing. And Corinne, perhaps going to you, this broader realm of the more I've learned about the world of upskilling and reskilling, I think the more complex it is because there's so many different models and training opportunities you can take on the job, through video, through apprenticeships, through training. And I think they create different outcomes for, I think, different populations. What do you see as some of the more successful models in providing this on-demand training for workers specifically? And we'll come back to sort of the education piece separately, but specifically for employees that in need of building those new digital skills. And are there any examples that that particularly stand out to you?
Thank you for the question. And so we can see in-demand training is moving fast, and the employer, one of the questions on the chat is, do you see the employer welcoming that in a very positive way? Yes, employers are really welcoming the in-demand training as a new way of learning, and as having people curious and people who want to move and to continue to grow and to have their long life cycle. So which is super important. So probably I can give you two examples that honestly I like to share. So I like to share it with you as well. So the first one is a partnership between Disney and General Assembly. So General Assembly is one of our brands. They are a worldwide leader, but I don't know if I can say that with the panel that we have, but in demand skills, and they have more than 70,000 alumni. So I think it's meaning something. But General Assembly and Disney partner together to achieve a very ambitious goal, which is between upskilling and diversity and inclusion. So they upskill 100 non-technical women employees at Disney. So they were either working in the park, in several different jobs in the park. And during 15 months, we gave them the opportunity to become a ROSI programmer. And today we can say that 95% of this cohort is still working at Disney. So you can see that even when you take on-demand, in-demand classroom, fully digital, and you change your way of you change completely your life by taking a simple job or being a blue collar one day to a programmer tomorrow or coder tomorrow. It's working, and you can increase your opportunity to find a good job. So honestly, I like this idea, and you can see as well that the people stays within the job. And probably my second example, which is one which is clearly feeding the making the future work for everyone, and taking in consideration what James said about minority, people of color, or whatever. We have one program called Aspire at the Edico Group, and this is for our employees, but also for our associates. And just before the pandemic, we welcome one young lady. Her name is Zubaira. So, and she came from Pakistan, and we just gave her the opportunity first to find a job. Just I want to say it's a job, just a job for food, nothing more than that. But during this job for food opportunity that we gave her, she was able. We pay for her some English lesson. And after several months as well, when she had, when her level of English was enough, we gave her as well the opportunity to take some administrative career courses. And now she's working in the admin. She has an admin role, exactly the same type of role that she has when she was in Pakistan. And I can tell you, we make her life. We make her life by doing that, and we finance 100% of this program, and we will continue to do that. And we have the opportunity, and we have the goal, and more than the opportunity, we have the goal to have 20% of our associates in the US going through this training every single year. So meaning to give a chance to more or less more than 5,000 people every year to upskill themselves via and in-demand training courses. And after that, we can have some other, apprenticeship is another one that we have, and we will continue also to develop, and also due to the engagement that the new government is taken on that subject.
It's trying to look more, helping our universities in particular look more from a demand perspective, and trying to understand what the employers are actually asking for around the jobs. And so going back to technology as the example, it's thinking through, the different careers that they need, the different skills, and then building that either into the degree programs themselves, or having short course formats that can work there. As an example, we're trying to figure out right now is, what is the role? And a question was asked in sort of the side channel here, which is a great question. What is the role of all these short courses that are coming up, right? Because the employer market has generally had the degree, if you will, as the signal of competency. And we all know that, yeah, I mean, it certainly says something to get a degree, but it's not sufficient. And it doesn't show where the individual is actually skilled or not. And so I think we're in this messy middle right now where you might have, 4,000 degree granting institutions in the US, and God knows how many smaller course format options that are coming from every different direction, from masterclass, to Udemy, to a Coursera, which sort of has the relationship with the university, but not really. And I think we're trying to figure that out. But I think that the learner is going to demand more instant gratification on, I need to learn this digital marketing skill, this negotiation skill, whatever it happens to be, and they're going to try to get it in as bite-sized format as possible. And I think you're going to see more and more of that, and I think you're going to see more and more collaboration between the employer and the universities to try to deliver some kind of credentialized, I might be making up a word there, educational format. Because right now you go to a Coursera or another MOOC or what have you, and you can say, oh yeah, I finished this. Maybe you get a certificate of completion. I mean, most people don't complete these things even. So I think we need to move beyond that, where people can actually give their transcript or their resume as part of as sort of saying what actually skills they ultimately have and what an employer can rely on. And so we're trying to help in that regard of like working with a company like Credly, which is, you know, trying to create badges. So we're, you know, again, working about what does the employer want in terms of those skills, making sure the universities are bringing that sort of badging type format that has a you know, again, a certification to that. So just adding that to the equation here.
Quickly, some of the things that I see employers investing in here, there are really four things that they're focused on. We see a lot of employers investing in digital or in a basic skill development, whether that's literacy and numeracy, English as a second language, high school completion, and then basic digital skills. So that's kind of a baseline where we see employers investing. In addition to that, we see employers investing heavily where there are acute skill shortages. Todd already mentioned nursing. That's a great example. Also, IT, whether it's cybersecurity, help desk workers, Python programmers, and then also skilled trades. So wherever there, again, are those acute skill shortages, that's where employers have been heavily investing. And then what isn't really talked about a lot is the investment going on in highly skilled, highly educated workers that employers are making to make sure people can continue to work at a very high level. One of the best examples of that is Amazon's Machine Learning University. So they have about 2,000 computer science graduates who work at Amazon, but unless they've graduated within the last 3 years, they may not have any machine learning knowledge that they learned in school. So Amazon built its own machine learning university, and they're investing in that to make sure, again, these highly educated computer programmers can keep their skills up to date and do what's needed now. And then the fourth area quickly that I'll mention is we've just seen a lot of employers thankfully investing in college degrees and certificate programs to help their workers gain general overall education and training abilities or skills and knowledge, I should say, to remain productive in the workforce. So those are kind of the main things that I've seen, Carlos.
The needs of vulnerable populations, refugees in developing countries, but also looking at sort of what digital skills gap and opportunities mean for populations in emerging markets, I think is particularly interesting. And I think you're leading quite a lot of innovative solutions in placing sort of new digital natives in new jobs that sort of cut across kind of geographical boundaries. So we'd love for you to talk a bit about that and those and what you're seeing in this space.
I do sometimes pick a fight a little bit with the term digital native, because I think there's digital native like jump on Facebook easily, you know, kind of navigate, screen connect socially. But actually, when it comes to using Excel effectively, effective PowerPoint presentation, how do you really use technology to communicate? I still think that needs to be directly taught usually. So I think sometimes there's this idea that across generations that, you know, the younger student automatically knows X, and then the older, outdated university admin, such as myself, doesn't know anything. And certainly I'm no tech expert. But I do think we do learners a disservice when we think of digital natives. You know, to me, what I've noticed is the social behavior is very digitally native. And also, it's not like perhaps previous generations, like the new generation is not going to look for a tech manual on how to do stuff, right? Like they'll just jump in and start trying. And so that's a digital native habit too. But we do a lot of direct teaching around how are you going to use technology to really drive your point home, to communicate clearly. Excel is just sort of a learned practice skill. Similarly, we don't let anybody start on their degree until they can type, because if you can't type, then, you know, let's make the quick 6-week investment to do it daily, so that you're not always, you know, having to take extra time to complete the degree. So we do kind of have this 10-point tech checklist, which is some hard skills, but then it's also some of the softer skills, like show us that you can find a reliable resource. How do you know it's reliable? And so we kind of directly teach some of the items, and then the digital native social habits kind of also come in and can enhance that. But I think in addition to that, in terms of learners who might not normally access higher education or some of the different certifications or courses to lead towards employment, is also the education itself is not going to be enough. Learners also have to have access to social capital. So a big part of our program is how do we create, depending on where culturally appropriate, a happy hour, shisha hour, tea hour. How are we really connecting our learners to employment opportunities? How do we get people excited about our learners, and how do we help them understand the different perspectives that somebody who's lived life as a refugee can bring to a company? So in particular for startups, I remember some of our students went to work and the CEO of a startup came in and said, okay, we have 1 month runway left and that's it. And everybody else was like, oh my gosh, we're not going to have a job at the end of the month. And then our students were like, 1 month. All right, we can solve this problem. We can do this. So I think also highlighting for employers what different life experiences can bring to companies that may not be readily apparent, or if there's some of the softer skills that start out a little rougher around the edges, that it's worth it to work it through with us. So I think there is the digital piece, some direct teaching, and then there's also kind of the connection to social capital and directly teaching students how to capitalize on those kind of relationships moving forward.
But one question that I just jumping on that, Chrystina, if I may, we had a workshop on the equitable future of work that was wonderful, and one of the things that surprised us was we were expecting a lot of conversations about automation and how to upskill to work with automated type of technologies, but really the conversation was more about who is designing these courses and who these courses are for, and how does that connect with preparing the workforce to be more diverse in the future, and how employers are connecting with that. What are their expectations in terms of how these students are getting educated, or where they're getting the information from? And the last is the equalizer in the room was, and this was coming from the students themselves, was the ability to move around and take courses or content from anywhere. A lot of times for free, but it wasn't necessarily the type of courses that were designed for how they engage with the content, if you know what I'm getting at. And so my question to, I think it'd be great to hear from Todd on this as you develop some of this content, would be how are you thinking about the equitable future of work, and how you design the content to get there, thinking about those tools that are available already. They seem to be mass produced and not really thinking about who's producing them.
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, you often hear it is the perspective of technology companies, and ultimately the people that run technology companies don't represent the population, so to speak. I have a couple thoughts here, because it isn't just about how you design, let's say, a program. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And one of the things, which I'm going to connect my colleague here from Southern New Hampshire, is that we actually have a program. We're helping to develop the content for SNHU's revised MBA program, which is going to be essentially a less than 1 year. You can finish it in less than a year and under $19,000. So what am I emphasizing here is cost, right? Cost is a major problem today in getting the right education with the right outcomes and getting people ultimately to completion. So I think we haven't talked about that enough, but yet today. So I just wanted to bring it up, that what we're trying to do is kind of right size cost when we can. And it's a challenge for us because we're part of the institution of expensive degrees, if you will. But we are seeing lots of great opportunities like this. You know, another example that I often use, and no one's really copied, is the Master's of Computer Science degree at Georgia Tech, where they had an on-campus program, 100 students, $65,000 roughly. This was, call it, 5 years ago. Now they have, I don't know, it's got to be close to 10,000 students, and it's less than $10,000. So think about that dramatic change, and what that's done is it's opened up, it's created access, right? It created affordability, and the outcomes, I call that the iron triangle of higher ed success: accessibility, affordability, and outcomes, has just opened this up to a world of people that would not have gotten their masters of computer science, including one of my directors of engineering that just couldn't, as a family, couldn't get it done on campus. But this opened up that opportunity for them. Another thing around money, if you will, is we need more creative funding models. You know, especially I'm thinking from the perspective right now of the university and the higher ed system, at least as it works in the US. Obviously, it's different in different parts of the world. But the market signals are really distorted between, you know, the program that is accredited to run, the students that are taking it, the ones that graduate, the debt that they have. I mean, it's no secret we have $1.7 trillion of debt or something along those lines. So something is wrong in the funding, and we need to think that through, right? Because my feeling is that if we can solve more of that, I think it will drive better outcomes for more people. Because a lot of the people that are saddled with debt is an inequity that we're all talking about here. A solution that's getting battered around in a lot of the boot camps out there, the coding boot camps, if you will, is the income share agreement. It's sort of on the fringe. I think it's a very interesting model that in theory could align a learner, the educational provider, and the person, sort of, whether it's the government or a third private party giving the loans. So that's sort of the supply side of thinking about things. You know, what also has a role in all of this is the employer. So I think it's been over 10 years where there's been this positive tax write-off for corporations when you get $5,250. And it's been my experience over the last decade or so that employers are not, they kind of have this interesting educational benefit. It's out there, anybody can get it, but they're not leaning heavily into it and really helping employees think it through. And you've seen some interesting scenarios like Amazon with Amazon Choice, which we actually just started working with around tech training, that are giving even way more than $5,000 a year. And then you've got the Starbucks Arizona State example, where they partnered up and brought the tuition down dramatically to help more people get a degree, which hopefully would keep people in their jobs longer and move up, and so on and so forth. So I didn't quite get to your question around course design or curriculum design. You know, I think it's a great, I think it's a very important question. I think that it's not just about when you're doing curriculum design, let's say looking at diversity from one angle. You have to think about, you know, all sorts of visual learners, auditory learners, other types of people with disabilities. That's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is, you know, what are people dealing with in terms of their life circumstances? What if they have a sick child at home and they need to come in and out of the education? The traditional model isn't designed enough towards that, especially the credit hour based model. Hopefully I'm not going too much into sort of academia mode here, but this sort of mastery model or competency based education model that certainly Southern New Hampshire has had a huge part of driving forward, I think can cater to a larger population of folks and solve some of the inequity of folks that are kind of coming in the system but not going out of the system and getting the jobs that they need to kind of advance in their life.
Yeah, I think, I mean, actually wanted to pick up one thing, you know, with one thing you said about cost and bring Jaime into the conversation, because I think the elephant in the room is also, how do you rethink some of those cost models that, you know, part should be undertaken by employers, but part should be the preview of the government, which is probably slower to innovate behind the new demand. So Jaime, would love your perspective on sort of what is the role of government in this evolution of upskilling debate, and what should be on the government versus the employers versus, like, how can we think about this more creatively and bringing other parties to the table?
Yeah, Anna, thank you. So I'm going to start with the employer side, if that's okay, because it links to a lot of the things that Todd was mentioning, which I thought he did a wonderful job of hitting some of the key points. I mean, we really do work with employers to help them understand the business benefits of providing more education and training for their workers. So we think the employer has a much stronger role to play, and we really wanted to see more of that. one of the reasons we think that's so important is because the employers are the ones who can first see the skill needs changing and can, better signal that to the education community. But the other thing Todd mentioned that I think is really important is that these tuition reimbursement programs that so many employers set up, that's just not a workable model anymore. And employers need to change that. I mean, the companies that have been talked about, Walmart, Disney, Chipotle, Starbucks, whoever it might be, I mean, they don't do tuition reimbursement anymore. What they do is they pay the education provider directly, and then the student can take advantage of the program. So we've really seen a lot of innovation. To get to the innovation part of your question, within these employer programs, employers have changed the who can enroll in the program. A lot more part-time workers can take advantage of these education programs than what used to. Employees can enroll in programs much sooner than they used to be able to. There aren't the payback clauses that a lot of employers used to have. These programs are often offered online, and they're designed for working adults. That's really important. There's career counseling that takes place ahead of time. So these working adults can make better decisions about the courses and the degrees that they're trying to obtain. And then there are success coaches who can work with adults throughout the program and help them, make sure that they complete the program. And then the last thing, I've got to touch on this government side. I think, our workforce system just is not designed for a time when things are changing so quickly. And I think it really is falling behind badly and needs to be updated. I think the major change that should happen is we've had what's called a trade adjustment assistance program for a long time. And, right now we all know the industries that are going to be impacted the most by digital transformation. We know it's retail, we know it's transportation, we know it's manufacturing, food service. We know all of that now. We need to be targeting workers who are in those industries right now and helping them develop their digital skills. The system that we have now is really designed to help people once they've been laid off, and we can't wait for that. We've got to be reaching people now where they are and help them develop those skills, assess their digital skills, and start developing them now while they're still employed and before it's too late. And just the last thing on that is we know so many of these projections about the millions of people who are going to lose their jobs due to automation, that those numbers were really, kind of far-fetched. We're probably not going to see those numbers, but we are going to see jobs changed and people required to work with technology. And that's another reason we need to be doing this now. So Anna, sorry about the long answer, but you got me cranked up with your question.
No, and I think it's a truly important discussion, and I think looking at some of these new models that will work for the many people. Chrystina, I would love to bring you in as well, because I think some of the government innovation led to the creation of this competency-based learning programs at Southern New Hampshire University. So, what are your perspective on sort of what you see as some of the benefits and more creative ways government can accelerate this transformation, and sort of what you see next for Southern New Hampshire University's model that is now more widely accessible? And so how can government be more of an accelerant of these types of solutions?
Yeah, well, I think when the accreditation process was happening for SNE2 for 2013 for this very different model, the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, at the time got behind it himself. But that is actually, while I'm happy that happened, if it's an exception to make things happen, then that's actually probably part of the problem, right? So if it's always, you have to have a relationship with somebody or somebody personally has to get behind it, that's a lot different rather than saying, hey, let's really put the learner at the center of this. Let's not put time, let's not put faculty at the center, and that shakes things up in a big way, I think. And I really do appreciate Todd's points around the price point. So the competency-based degree around that work now. The number one requirement is it should not cost more than a Pell Grant, because we at least want learners to have some sort of option where they can graduate debt-free. But that's of course challenging. And then, as Todd mentioned, we are also working on other programs. Learners are telling us we want it faster, we want it cheaper, and we want the skills. I think if higher ed doesn't do it, then Amazon's going to do it, Google's going to do it. Like, somebody's going to come in this space and do it. So I think it's going to have to be up to us to decide if we want to stay in our old ways or be able to push on things. But I'm definitely deviating from the government question. I mean, I think at best government can just stay out of the way a little bit and allow innovation to happen. So I think where we're operating, it's actually sort of worked that way. So the governments have not necessarily required us to get local accreditation, which would take a very, very long time. Instead, we do online scholarships. The accreditation comes from the US, and then we work with local partners to help identify learners, support learners, make sure they have their laptops, make sure they can get medical social care and all the other wraparound services that we provide, because it is online and in person with partners. So we're quite friendly with governments. We always let them know of that we're offering scholarships, but we don't ever establish a quote unquote physical presence, which would then require accreditation. And it takes so long. I mean, I was just talking to the folks who run High Tech High out in California, and they're now doing High Tech Ed, I think. It's a competency-based master's program. Really, really exciting stuff. Kind of getting teachers and skilling up paraprofessionals, similar to the question earlier in the chat box around how could we take medical professionals and then make pathways forward. I hope we can figure this out in the medical field too, but they're taking paraprofessionals and enabling them to apply skills, show competencies, and be able to get their teaching certificate. And it took them 6 years to get it accredited. So, I mean, accreditation serves an important purpose for quality, but it's also gotten to the point where it also really can stymie innovation. So I think if governments can create the space, maybe a little less paperwork could help. But I do understand the flip side, right? We don't want institutions preying on students, but I think there are easier ways to figure out if institutions are preying on students than what we've set up now, which is sort of this year-long, hugely paperwork process type of thing. So yeah, more like anything, more collaboration.
No, for sure. And look, and this is the session is recorded, and we're hoping to share this also with quite a few others, and to stimulate a broader discussion on this topic. I wanted to move us to a topic that is near and dear to well, at least 50% of people showing up on the screen, but I think hopefully more so everybody. Women lost nearly 800 billion in income last year, which is equivalent to about 98 countries or so in GDP. And it just reflects the disproportionate ways that COVID impacted women in the workforce. And as we talk about this sort of new quote unquote norm of build back better, I think we need to think about not just how we bring women back with the pandemic implications, but how do we make sure that women are not leaving the workforce after the next pandemic or the next sort of market crisis. And so actually I want to pose this question to all of you, and Carlos, you're welcome to address it as well if you'd like. Thank you for being such a great partner in moderation. But perhaps Corinne, starting with you, how do we build back better? How do we make sure that there are longer term opportunities to create more sustainability for women in the workforce, and how do we ultimately close the gender gap? So quite a few questions.
Yeah, no, and it's an important one. Huh? 5 million of American women left jobs in 2020, which is a lot. Huh? And the population that has been extremely impacted by that is the population of color. So meaning we have two things here. We have the diversity, and in front of that, and in reality as well, how we can really include more women in the workplace. So we can see, and we are discussing that with a lot of clients that we have in the US as well, because we can see a shortage. So we are back more or less at a level of unemployment at around less than 6% in April, and we will continue to see a decrease on the unemployment. And we have this pool of people who wants to work, but today the workplace is not really welcoming them in a way that this can help them to have the best balance between their family life and their professional lives. So we are discussing a lot with our clients about how we can increase a part-time job, the part-time opportunity, and with the digitalization is becoming clearly an opportunity. The other topic that we have to have this the woman back at work is about being much more flexible in terms of hours. I read something this morning about 20% of the income of the woman in the US on single mom goes to the child care, which is a lot. So meaning that if we can have this opportunity to implement some flexible work, so some flexible hours, this will also decrease that cost and increase the fact that they can be employed. So this is from the employer point of view. I think now from the policymaker, and you touched that a bit earlier, saying in terms of upskilling and training, but to be honest, we have to continue to push on the pay equity. We still have an issue with the pay equity. A woman is less paid than a man today in that country and everywhere in the world. The second one is about the family leaves. This should be also something that when your kids is sick, you should be able to have some family leaves and some leaves. And this is something that should be, for me, a co-investment between employers and the government. And my last part, I spoke about that, about the childcare. So how we can have an affordable childcare to make sure that this population, the woman, can come back at work, create a strong income for their family, and not being able to spend 20%, even more time on the childcare cost. So. And we are all responsible for that, and you know, it's you know, this last survey we did on that, 2.1 million ladies in the US, they say that if the situation will not become better in terms of support, we will never come back. We will never re-enter to the market, to the job market. This is bad. I mean.
Yeah, but it's something we need to fix, and I think also fixing the broader social norms that come with the, you know, who the childcare responsibilities fall on. Todd, quick thoughts from your end before we kind of go the rest of the panel.
Yeah, I mean,
Corinne,
sort of lightning round. Yeah, she did an amazing job nailing that one. But I would just add, we have 7,000 employees, so we're thinking all over the globe. We're thinking about this issue big time. Just to emphasize 3 points. One is the hybrid work environment, or virtual first work environment, I think is essential. I think when you favor an office environment, which we're all sort of debating, can we start going back? You then are going to have the club of folks that are in the office, and they're going to be maybe more part of that decision making, and then those that are behind the screen, which right now, look at the 6 of us here, we're all sort of equal in this process. So I think one, and that might be part of the things that get to help solve some of the inequities in pay. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of things you have to do. But I believe strongly that a very flexible work environment is really important. But also not just that, but designing around virtual. So you just don't allow people to work 20 hours in a day, right? You could go the other end of the spectrum like it did for many of us when we started the pandemic. So I think you have to be cautious about that. The second thing is about, you know, educating the children. Again, going back to what Corinne said, I think we've done some things, like we have a partnership with Sylvan Learning. I mean, tutoring, a lot of us are jumping out of the rooms and helping people with the math problems and doing this all other stuff, especially for mothers. I think we need to support them on both the educational front And then on the caring front, and not just childcare, there's other caring fronts, elder parents, a lot of other things. So I think we need to create policies, both employer directed and maybe larger countrywide perspectives that just take away that friction in that work area, so they, between the flexibility and maybe taking some of the load off, hopefully we can get more people back to work here.
And I can just jump in and add a couple things real quickly. I do know some of the companies that we work with have specific programs designed to help bring women back into the workforce. Workday has an opportunities on-ramp program where they're trying to help get women back into the workforce. A company called Red Ventures also has a returnship program to try to get women who were in technology-related programs, help them get their skills back up to speed so they can re-enter the workforce. And then, I think it's notable that Accenture has a goal of 50% of their workforce being female. And I think that's wonderful when a company just sets a goal like that. But, Corinne and Todd nailed it. The most important thing they can do is they can create a workplace with a culture and a benefit package that's going to encourage women to want to work and make it possible for them to be there.
And I think this the tone from the top, which I'm so glad that we have both in Corinne and in Todd as CEOs of their respective organizations. I think is particularly important, and I think leadership commitment should not be understated. And I think making that change. Chrystina, quickly to you.
Yeah, I think I really want to echo many of the excellent points the group brought up, especially childcare. Like, what if childcare was just, I have a feeling that if traditionally men were in charge of taking care of kids, childcare would already be included in a workplace benefit. So maybe we can just make that part of what we do. But I also think the struggle that I see now, both in educational programs as well as workplaces, is this is kind of an afterthought. It's an add-on. So I think unless it's really purposefully built into the fabric of a place and company, then it's going to be a challenge. And maybe COVID gives a nice opportunity for people to make some thoughtful plans around that. On the education front for us, I mean, we women's preparation programs, we do 50-50 admissions, we track along the way, we do affirmative action where needed, and then actually Lebanon has challenged us in the reverse, where it's more challenging for men to study, and so we need to do affirmative action to make sure we have enough men in our programs. So I think keeping an eye on those stats and tracking and really building the preparation, the interventions in between. So we have programs where we pay somebody to walk a baby to a learning center so that mom isn't walking an hour to go breastfeed and then missing learning time. So just thinking about and financially planning for those interventions and just having it be a part of the fabric of the program has been important. And then we're trying to work more on how do we coach women as they enter their careers in that first job and really being able to advocate for themselves. And the last thing I just want to double down on Corinne's point. I think transparency would really, really help. But if companies aren't ready for that, then women should be talking to each other or talking to their colleagues, or male colleagues can share with their females what the counterparts, what they're making. I read an article a ways back that said that, and a group of us just tried to do that, and we kind of then were able to think about equity more broader as a group, and it also helped men be advocates for their female counterparts. So yeah, and you kicked us off beautifully. I would just emphasize and highlight all those points made.
That's great, Chrystina. I think we have a couple of minutes until we move all to the plenary session. And so I wanted to give Tobias maybe a minute of intervention on gender gap innovations. But before I go to Tobias, I wanted to give you guys a heads up. What I want to end with is for each of you to maybe share in a sentence what you're most optimistic about. I mean, what the folks who are watching us around the world are technology entrepreneurs who are looking to disrupt this field of future of work. So what advice and perhaps a point of optimism do you have for each of them? So I'll go to you in a minute. I think maybe first quickly Tobias on Kieran, and then we'll wrap this up.
Well, an intervention. I would not call it an intervention in this regard. I'm not the perfect expert for closing the gender gap, and I'm afraid that I very much agree with everything said until now in this regard. I do believe in, let's say, diverse and flexible working environments. I think digital learning opportunities are important for of the day, but of course also for women, and then also digital working opportunities, which are typically more flexible than if you are have to go into an office. So in this regard, I'm sorry for not being that creative. I would like to share a thought which is more basic and refers to future skills. Don't know whether this is already the moment.
Yeah, I think we only have about a minute left, so I would love to wrap this up. So let's start with Todd. What are you most optimistic about, and what advice do you have for innovators in the future of workspace?
I am very optimistic about what we call career connected education. We've got so much momentum here from these short courses. We've got, big tech, we call, is like 25% of the S&P, those 5 companies. They're all doing aggressive things around skills-based training. I see more transparency, which I think is then...
That was more than one sentence, and I think we're going to be cut off. So we're moving to...
Cut me off.
Sorry. Okay, go ahead. Corinne, what are you most optimistic about?
Thank you. I'm very optimistic saying because people will develop a culture of learning. And if they are bold and they love to take risk, plus a culture of learning, they will make the world.
Fantastic. Chrystina?
As tough as COVID has been, I'm also optimistic about the disruption it's caused and the possibilities around new ways of thinking about work, who's doing it, and how they're doing it.
Fantastic. And Jaime?
Yeah, I'm just excited about the number of employers who are beginning to invest in this education, training, and development of their workers. A lot more needs to be happening, but we are seeing positive things there, and it's benefiting the companies, the individuals, and communities. So that's all good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much. It's been a great panel, and I feel like we only scratched the surface of so many really important topics. So hopefully we'll continue this discussion in a broader format. And thank you to MIT School for also catalyzing many of the innovative solutions in the space. And I think we're now moving to a plenary session. And so thank you all very much for a great insight.
Thank you.